Hey everybody, it's Thursday and welcome to Nerd Wars. So happy to be with you guys. I see so many in the chat room already. Welcome tonight. Tonight is going to be special because we have a special guest. So honored to have him here. So glad he was, thank you for waiting. He's been in the room. Let's introduce, guys, if you don't know him. Ladies and gentlemen, Kamran Pasha. What's up, Kamran?
I'm right here. I'm delighted to be here. I'm excited for this call. Thank you for your patience. I know we had some technical difficulties, but I think a lot of people in the chat have been hanging on. So hopefully we'll be able to have an interesting conversation for them.
I'm excited. I've heard you around, and a lot of colleagues of mine, other channels out there. You're very well spoken. You know your movies. You're a fan. You're a writer. You're a filmmaker. For those that don't know, Kamran has worked on Sleeper Cell, NBC's Kings, Bionic Woman over at NBC, which I actually was a really big fan of, and my favorite, Nikita, which was such a fun show. So much amazing stuff you've been working on and you've done. He also has a bunch of books. You can go over to Kamran Pasha. I want to make sure we plug, and you guys can go check out some of his amazing books over there at KamranPasha.com. But Kamran, welcome. Thank you for being here. So honored to have you. So I've been out there seeing you talk Star Wars, and I thought I would love to go there. But before we get there, can you how did you get into this industry? Tell us a little bit about how you sort of became a producer screenwriter in Hollywood.
Sure. You know, I'm a bit of an unusual guy here, and I didn't really have any connections. Most people I would suggest in Hollywood are in this industry with at least some kind of connection, right? You know, I was born in Pakistan, raised in Brooklyn, New York. You know, I was a lawyer for a bit. I was a journalist for a bit. No connection to Hollywood, and I was actually in graduate school. I'd gone back. I was getting my law degree and my MBA. So I was getting a JD MBA, trying to do that immigrant thing, get lots of degrees, make lots of money, right? And I was bored out of my mind. I was in an accounting class, and I wrote a script in that class just out of boredom, because I couldn't make the balance sheet balance, couldn't make sense of it. And I said, you know, I'm a creative guy. Let me at least have some fun with this. Sort of teen horror script. Working as a lawyer in New York, and I had that script from school. I said, maybe I can do something with it. Sent it out to some agents. One of them actually liked it, represented me. And then I sold my first script to Paramount, and I was like, oh, I just got this huge check. Oh, I can do this. So I quit my job as a lawyer and moved to LA in 2001, and been doing this now almost 20 years, 19 years plus now.
Fantastic. Well, congrats, man. Awesome to hear. And yeah, I mean, some amazing stuff. It's not always easy to succeed in that town. So congratulations. Yeah, I mean, so you're still out there in Hollywood. You live there currently? That's where you're bunkered down?
Right now, the sky is almost black because of all the fires. You know,
it's wild. I've seen the pictures. Yeah,
pretty crazy out here.
Well, good. So I can call you a Hollywood insider then, right? There we go. We got another one on the line. Good.
Yeah, I'm a working professional, and I know people, and the thing is this, people will often just judge you by your IMDb. There's a lot of stuff that I've done that's not on IMDb. You know, I developed a project with Oliver Stone that I was very proud of. It was a project that was set in Guantanamo Bay for Showtime Networks, just never got on the air. One of the reasons was because one of the producers on that show was Harvey Weinstein, and so when Mr. Weinstein had his downfall, that show got pulled. And so, there's a lot of stuff that I have done that people aren't aware of.
What was it like with Oliver Stone? That must have been a trip.
Oh, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, look, he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and I was a huge, huge fan. So, I mean, I was trying to not be just a fanboy in front of him, right? I remember I did one thing. I was embarrassed the first day I met him. We were chatting, and we're just chatting in the hall, walking down from our office, and he goes to the bathroom, and I follow him in, and I'm like, pitching him stuff and talking to him in the bathroom. These poor guy's just trying to take a pee, and I was like, what am I doing? I mean, that's the craziest thing in the world. I mean, poor Oliver Stone just trying to use a urinal, and I'm like talking about this and trying to get interested in one of my scripts or whatever. And I was like, I've lost my mind. But he just told me after, he said that people follow me in the bathroom pitching me. It happens to me all the time.
That's so wild.
It's part of his life. It's like he sort of accepted it.
He gets used to people bothering him. That's just crazy. Yeah, no. When my slow rise to fame, there was one point I got bothered, like a waiter, interrupting me in my fountain. I realized, man, this is cool, but the scale, people like Oliver Stone or Brad Pitt, I can't even imagine. But yeah, I guess you do get used to it. Well, awesome. I mean, yeah, we'll hear more, but let's focus on this main event, then we'll pivot off. And if you guys have questions for Kamran, let's come over, because Hollywood Insider here. I have some questions. I also want to pick your brain about I'm trying to get a script done, and I have a question actually that you might be able to help me motivate me to. But let's start with Star Wars, because I've seen you talking about that. You're a Star Wars fan. That's safe to say, yes. But were you a fan of the Star Wars sequels?
No, I've been very straightforward about them. I was really, I went from being sort of disappointed to horrified to angry, right? And that's the stage. I saw The Force Awakens, and I was like, it was the first Star Wars movie that I didn't go see twice in the theater. Like, I didn't really like Episode 1 that much, but I went and saw it multiple times in the theater because because there were enough aspects of the Phantom Menace that I did like them, and it's Star Wars, it's George Lucas. I was going to go see it, But after watching The Force Awakens, I'm like, I feel like I've seen this before. I thought Daisy really did a perfectly good job. I thought John Boyega, I thought the cast was good. I just felt hollow after watching that movie. I was like, all right, okay, I've seen it. I feel like I've seen this before, which it is. It's A New Hope, right? And I was like, all right, I'm not going to see it again. But I was actually very excited for The Last Jedi because I had enjoyed Looper, and I'd like what Rian Johnson had done with Looper. And so I was like, this is going to be great. And then I felt like I was punched in the head. I mean, I walked out of that theater from The Last Jedi in a daze, and I couldn't sleep that night. I was up till probably 5, 6 a.m. in bed, unable to sleep, because I was so disturbed by the movie and by what it had done to the franchise. And then it went from being disturbed to becoming angry, and then I became a little outspoken. And a lot of my fellow screenwriters and industry people share this opinion, but most of them are like, why would I talk about it publicly? Why would I alienate Kathleen Kennedy? Why would I alienate Lucasfilm? Why would I alienate Disney? I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. I have a long list of enemies. Some of them are actually pretty well-known, famous people. If I mention their name, you're like, oh, that guy don't like you. I'm like, yeah, no, I had to run in with him. So at this point, I got my enemies and I got my friends, and I still have a career and I'm doing interesting things. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to say what I say. And because Star Wars is important to me, it's more than just a movie, right? When people said that stuff, it was like, man, it's just a movie. What's to be done? It's not just a movie. This thing got through some really difficult moments of my childhood, right? Those action figures I had with Luke Skywalker, they allowed me to escape problems I was having at home and allowed me to create another world. The reason I'm a screenwriter today is because of Star Wars, because I created I would make entire movies with my action heroes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I learned how to be a screenwriter as a little kid by taking these action heroes and making my own fan fiction with them. And so it's not just a movie to me. And when you're messing with its mythology like that, in a really destructive way, in my opinion, I was going to speak out.
So do you have insight? I mean, because I feel like everybody always feels like they have their insight on who's really at fault. Do you feel like, are you just doing this as a fan and speculating, or do you feel like you do have some insight on what went wrong? Because the part of this story is, people are finally starting to talk, right? That's the big story here. And so the main news story, just to pivot before you answer, just Daisy Ridley was out there on the Jimmy Kimmel show that was guest hosted by Josh Gadd, her friend. And so he basically, he's fanboying, asking Star Wars questions because he's just sort of the most commercially Disney fanboy you can ever be. But he's not gonna rip it. But it was interesting because he's asking these questions, but in doing so, he really sort of got her to uncover sort of the reality of there was no plan. And so he asked, was there, what other answers were there? Was Palpatine always supposed to be the grandfather? And she goes, at the beginning, there was toying with like an Obi-Wan connection. And then it really went, there were different versions. And then it really went to she's no one. And then it came to episode 9, and JJ pitched me the film and was like, oh yeah, Palpatine is granddaddy. And I was like, awesome. And then 2 weeks later, he was like, we're not sure. So it kept changing. And then even Ridley's audio drop, we were filming, and I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be. So, I mean, this is telling, and this is sort of, I'm kind of impressed that she's finally speaking up. John Boyega has stopped sort of hiding his feelings as well out there of sort of the Disney machine. But look, I mean, this proves what we all already knew. And I think, and it's been funny watching a lot. I don't know if you've seen any of them. There's been a lot of Star Wars fans who have been reacting to this clip kind of like, oh man, it's sort of like, how do you defend it now? Because it really does put it out there, right? That they clearly had no idea what they were doing.
Well, the way they defend it, I mean, the fanatics, right? I mean, there's like a cult of these Disney Lucasfilm people that I don't understand, right? But these fanatics, right, are out there saying, well, George Lucas didn't have a plan. I'm like, have you ever, the Journal of the Whills? He was writing about that in his notes in 1976.
Yep.
All right.
Fact.
So don't tell me he didn't have a plan. Okay, he thought this mythology out really deeply, right? He just had it evolved with time, but he didn't come into this like, I'm going to make this up as I go along.
Yeah, he may not have been a good director for actors. Like I will cave on. He's admitted that too. I feel like, but yeah, it's this is finally, I think, the answer that we've sort of the proof we've been waiting from someone high up there, Daisy Ridley. And I got no beef with Daisy Ridley. I think she tried her best. Ray was a good. I mean, I have no qualms with her or really any of the actors. I think it's unfair when the fans go after them. Who should we go after? And who do you think is really blame? I mean, the answer for most people is Kathleen Kennedy. She's the one in charge. Do you share that same sort of opinion that it's her, the buck stops with her, and that's what happened here?
Well, and to answer that, I want to actually answer your earlier question, which is, am I just sharing opinions as a fan, or do I have some insight? I have not worked at Lucasfilm. I have worked at Disney. I was the head writer for the TRON animated series, so I've worked internally at Disney, and I came to know it quite quite well and have very strong opinions about Disney. So I have that. But I have several friends, and I've said this in other live streams, but I've had several friends who are very deeply involved with Lucasfilm, people who know George Lucas personally, and so they've shared a lot of insights of what's going on. So these are the perspectives that I share from talking to my friends. Again, there is that game of telephone. I'm hearing it from people, but it's only one degree of separation.
Yeah, whisper down the lane, could be changing.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I'm hearing it from a guy who I knows George Lucas. So he could be misleading me, but when I hear from 3 or 4 different people, then there's a consistent message. I think it's pretty accurate.
Well, and I'd be curious. So go ahead, share your story, and I'll say if that's what I've heard too. That way, more of these get shared. We'll start finally having. Yeah, well, that seems to be what happened. But go ahead. What is your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, the consistent message I hear from my sources is that yes, this is Miss Kennedy, who I've actually met. I met her very early in my career. I liked her. She was a perfectly nice person. She's worked on incredible movies, but she made choices on Star Wars that were, in my opinion, coming from an ideological place, and that's been confirmed by my friends who know all of these people, right, very well. And they say, look, she came in, but like everyone else I work with in Hollywood, she had strong, very progressive opinions about things. Even before the recent, the current election and the election of President Trump, even back in, when Disney first purchased Star Wars, that was still during the Obama era. That was 2012, right? And so there was still the general progressive feeling of the late Obama era that we're here, we're going to, put a message out that's going to really impact and shape culture moving forward. And so she was part of that. And that's the standard message that I've gotten working almost 20 years in this town, that people feel that they have to influence society with certain political messages that there's a large consensus of. I'm not necessarily part of that consensus, but there's a consensus of what those messages are. They're largely progressive and left. And so, and I don't think she had any discomfort with doing that. I think she saw Star Wars as a vehicle for expressing these ideas, which a lot of people at that time were thinking. We're in this great moment. We've got this black president who seems very progressive, and we're going to really put our ideas out.
Now, just to ask a question, though, to echo that, not to interrupt, but you think that, so you that was Kennedy's doing, that wasn't coming from Iger or anybody else, sort of top line Disney saying, hey, you know what, let's all agree we're gonna change this ship? Or was that really Kathleen, from what you've heard, obviously?
My understanding is that it was Kathleen Kennedy, but I don't think she thought it was anything controversial.
Right.
I don't think she was thinking it was a plan. I think, because it's the norm. It's the norm of the people I work with. They think, I mean, certainly in the last 10 years, maybe not so as much when I first started, and I said I've been doing this 19 years, but definitely in the last decade, people feel that, that the purpose of entertainment is to teach, to spread a message, to educate the masses with a value system that they believe is morally correct. And I don't think that was controversial. I don't think she was thinking, I'm going to take over this franchise and mess with it. She's like, that's just what everyone's doing, right? Everyone's putting in the values they believe are morally correct, at least in this time. And I think the events that, and I think in The Force Awakens, she influenced that. But I mean, initially, I think, from what I'm hearing from my sources, it was very much, she wanted to make it a female-centric, franchise in her mind, which I think I'm of the opinion that it's always been a healthy representation of females in Star Wars, always. But she felt, as many people in Hollywood, it's not enough, and we shift the emphasis away from the white male, and we got to now bring in, interesting enough, we got to bring in the white female, which is what, she herself is, right? And so you had a situation where, she created characters that reflected herself. She, Rey is a white British female, right? And then you had the same characters, Jyn Erso is a white British female, right? I mean, this is a pretty consistent pattern of what was happening, which was, and I don't believe Ms. Kennedy is British, but I'm assuming from her name, she's of Irish descent. So, of the same area, right? So white women that sort of reflect yourself, and you're presenting that. And again, it wasn't controversial. I think that from what I've been told, it was literally it was a combination of two things that happened in The Last Jedi. One is the massive success of The Force Awakens gave her the feeling, okay, now nobody's going to second guess me, because on The Force Awakens, she was able to get the lead character she wanted. She was able to essentially, do the kind of Star Wars, which is mimicking George Lucas's original movie, and get it out there. And, and she thought she was doing a diversity thing. I'm going to make sure there's a black guy there as a stormtrooper, which I don't have a problem with it, because I don't have a problem with Lando Calrissian either, right? I don't think George Lucas had any problem with African Americans. We know that. But she, again, was thinking, I'm going to bring diversity in. And that was the thing. The second thing that I heard that sort of changed events for The Last Jedi was the election of President Trump, right? Which I know from my own experience galvanized this town. It was a shockwave. Yep. People didn't see it coming. I saw it coming. I tell people, guys, I don't think Hillary's going to win this. Shut up. We don't want to hear that. Don't be, that's crazy. I'm like, I don't think you guys see what's happening, but whatever. So it happened, and then the shockwave that happened made people suddenly go from their standard, well, we're just here to educate people with a moral philosophy to becoming an imperative. The world is being taken over by Nazis. Now we have no choice but to make this as clear and ham-fisted as possible to reverse the evil tide of history that we're in, right? Mm-hmm. That's how they saw it. And so suddenly she had just come off of the Force Awakens. President Trump gets elected. And so The Last Jedi is in the works. And from what I understand, she pretty much told Mr. Johnson, okay, these are the issues, these are the themes that I want, and we have to do this because it's now critical to use Star Wars, which is going to influence millions of people because the world is under attack from fascism, right, in her mind. And so that The Last Jedi became what it was, which was, in my opinion, a very ham-fisted, ham-handed, preachy movie that was poorly written and didn't make any real sense. Internally as a movie, it made no sense, and it made no sense in the broader universe that we had already established. But because she was at that point invincible, no one really in Disney questioned. I'm sure there were people. I've heard that Bob Iger, from my friends, like, yeah, Bob Iger was like, when he saw the initial cut, he's like, I don't know about this. This doesn't feel like what I signed up for with this, right? It doesn't feel like The Force Awakens. Are you sure about this, Kathleen? But, he let it through because she had already made Force Awakens a massive success.
Yep.
And he, like everyone else in Hollywood, it's just like, hey, man, this is our way to say to F you to Trump, right? We got to get these toxic males and put them in their place and got to teach people about these things because it's really critical now. So he let it through, even with his misgivings. That was a disaster and a mistake. So that's what I've heard. It was these series of events that made this thing cascade into something bigger than perhaps it would have been had those events not happened.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because I saw someone in there. In fact, I thank you for the super chat. Send them over, guys. I'll get to them as we go. I just don't want to interrupt the flow. But Michael, I'm going to go to yours. Thank you, Micah Caratua, for sending over. He asked a question which parlays what I was about to ask you of like, yeah, that's fair in Last Jedi, but I feel like Last Jedi had a lot of problems. Like Last Jedi had a lot of creative problems because I got no problem with them putting a female in, right? Diversifying, like, okay, great, as long as it's written well and not, just obvious and stupid.
I love Starbuck in the new Battlestar Galactica. I was like, this is, and I work with the actress on Bionic Woman. I was like, she's great. She's perfect for this. I didn't have any issue.
Right. It's like when you write it to do it, when you write it just to be the hero as female and not actually just write a strong female character is where I think the mistakes often happen. But part of the biggest problem I think for many people with Last Jedi was Luke Skywalker, right? And then so Michael asked us too, like, do you think they did a good job with Luke Skywalker's character in the sequels? And if not, what would you have done differently? Yeah, I'm curious, what would you have done? But I mean, do you agree that was also part of the problem of just sort of it? And I had heard that Ryan did get some of that. That was a lot of his own creative vision of those choices of Raise a Nobody and Luke Skywalker, his path. Those were his choices. No, did you not have, or have you heard something different?
No, I mean, I think that this was this moment where basically two people of similar values were brought together, Kathleen Kennedy and Ryan Johnson, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that sitting in a room, they felt like they found twin souls. Oh my God, you get me, you go do that. And so I'm sure Mr. Johnson came in and said, look, we've got to tear down this patriarchal structure of Star Wars, and this is the way to do it. And we've got to take away this fundamental myth and rebuild it for the next generation. And you have to do that by eliminating and humiliating Luke Skywalker. Because now in the mindset of people that think like this, which is very common in Hollywood, it isn't about, we're going to include women and empower minorities. It's about denigrating white males, right? And that's the only way you can actually, because when you respond, well, George Lucas had women, and from the very beginning, first time you see Leia, she's holding a laser gun. I mean, first time you see her, she's in action, right? She has a blaster in her hand. And then you meet Lando Calrissian. He's more charming and he's a bigger smoothie than Han Solo, and almost gets a go from her, right?
Yep.
So it's like, well, George Lucas had minorities and he had strong women. It's like, so the only way you can then counteract that is that, yes, but he did it under the structure of a patriarchal male, blonde, white guy, and we have to undermine that. And I believe Mr. Johnson philosophically believed that. And Kathleen Kennedy said, oh my God, this is a godsend. You're the right guy for this. You understand what we need to do for these broader issues. And so I'm sure those were his ideas. It's unfortunate, those choices. But to answer the earlier question, I despise what was done with Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is a universal hero. he's like Odysseus. He's he's an archetype of the human condition, right?
Yep.
And I ain't Greek and I can appreciate Odysseus, man. I'm a brown Muslim guy and I can appreciate this blonde dude from Tatooine, who follows the religion of the Force, because I connect with his human journey of his loneliness, his feeling of loss and failure in his home, and then this incredible adventure goes on, and then the horrific discoveries about his past that he learns, and the redemption of his father. I get that whole journey. And what they did there, the reason I couldn't sleep was, I was disappointed at the end of The Force Awakens when you just see Luke, but I was hopeful. All right, you're going to go somewhere with this guy, right? And then the moment Luke threw the lightsaber over his shoulder, I was like, my stomach just fell. I was like, I knew immediately what was happening because I've been in these writers' rooms where people are talking about subverting expectations. I've sat in writers' rooms where I'm arguing about, guys, I don't think we need to do that to the white male character. I don't think it actually advances the story. Why are we doing it? And it's because you've got to change the social structure of the country, and to do that, you have to change the representation of who the hero is. And so I said, oh my God, they're doing that to Star Wars. And then it got worse and worse and worse. And then he dies at the end. And I couldn't believe it was like taking away the central myth of my childhood. And, and then watching Mark Hamill do his interviews and realizing that he was heartbroken by what had happened, that he was vocal about it, it just enraged me further. And so to answer I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'm not even.
No, I love hearing you talk, but you're right. I love you because even Mark has sort of acknowledged. You see it over time. The frustration has been brewing in him of like, he was pretty vocal and then trying to like, I'll appease the mouse, but. I don't you. Someone else asked earlier, and so let me get, because this is related. Thank you about that for donating it early. Looking forward to getting some insight on what the hell is going on with Star Wars. Do you think Adam Driver or Oscar Isaac will speak out too? Keep on killing it in the channel, Andy. Thank you about that. But it's interesting. Do you think Mark Hamill or all these other do you think more and more people are going to start just saying, you know what, screw it. Yeah, this wasn't a great experience. Because now we got Daisy Ridley sort of, I feel like that was clearly a dig. She took that dig.
No, it was an intentional choice. She didn't have to answer the question.
Correct, yeah. So do you think, so you agree that was intentional, and do you think others are starting to sort of feel like, you know what, we got to start speaking up to this because this didn't work?
I think Daisy has now opened up the floodgates. John Boyega began that process. Well, Mark Hamill began the process, but he was out there alone in the desert for several years, right? And then, and you could tell in the interviews, he sometimes sat next to Daisy Ridley, and she was nodding sympathetically as he talked about his disagreements with Rian Johnson, right? But she was under an NDA, and she realized it's not a good idea for me to be talking about, so she kept quiet. Right. John Boyega decided I've had enough, and this was the moment because you can say, look, as a black man at a time where we're listening to what black people's struggles are, let me share with you my struggle. So people listen to him. Daisy didn't have to interject into this. She chose to interject into this, right? And that suggests to me that Ms. Kennedy's power is completely eliminated now. It's been a process, right? I think she was struggling to retain her voice in Lucasfilm in the last year with Mr. Trevorrow rising, but I think it's finished. And I think for, Daisy Ridley, who essentially represented the idealized vision of Miss Kennedy may have had of herself, right, projected onwards, is now criticizing this in a way that's obviously going to be a red flag for fans. She knew what she was saying. She should have answered as like, they kept it was all a mystery and a surprise. When I learned about oh wow, she's Palpatine is great. Instead, she said they didn't know what they were doing and they kept changing it. That's a choice to reveal that, right?
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if others like Oscar Isaac come out. It's all about whether they feel that they have something that's going to add value to this conversation. I think John and Daisy have already done that because John, Boyega was being held up as, we had a black man, right? We brought diversity, and a black man disassociated, said, you brought diversity by disrespecting me. Right. Which has been, I'm a minority in Hollywood, and I keep saying, guys, this token character creating is insulting and disrespectful. Just because you put somebody with this face on the screen and you give them an insulting character, it's like what happened to Kelly Marie Tran.
Yeah.
She's a great actress. I would work with her in a second.
Yeah, I liked her.
She's given a garbage script and
nothing
a garbage
wrong
role.
with her, right? It was unfair. But to echo what you were saying about Boyega, yeah, like they even like shrunk or took him off the posters in China because China's like, yeah, we don't want the black guy in the poster. Like there was so much stuff going on that was that I think Boyega has been why. I'm glad he's speaking up.
I mean, that enraged him. It would have enraged me when I saw that, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting we talk about Kelly Marie Tran, and we can talk about the way it could have been fixed. I've read Colin Trevorrow's script, Duel of the Fates, which I love.
So let me set that up. So I want to hear this because yes, Last Jedi was a problem, right? If we just get to the timeline, let's get to that topic next because I know that's the next thing I want to talk to you about. Last Jedi has its problems. Agreed. At the same time, there's part of me it's like, you know what? I kind of like that she was a nobody. I kind of would have preferred that. If I'm going to take anything from that, okay, interesting. Doesn't solve all the problems. But then you have Trevorrow's script, which at least felt like a continuation from The Last Jedi, right? And on top of that, he cracked the problem of what I'd heard was, Luke had to be dead was sort of some weird rule that I had heard.
He tried to get Luke back. They told him no.
Yes.
And then he had to write the script with him dead.
And so, Colin, because I haven't read the full thing, but chunks were sent to me, and especially the ending and parts of it. But I thought, from what I've seen so far, a pretty good chunk of it, he just brilliantly figured out how to take the baton and sort of carry it in a way that I thought, you know what? He made it work. And so what really frustrates me when you see that and then you realize they just burned him and said, nope, and they torched him pretty much. And then decided to, we're going to go back to JJ, who clearly didn't want to be there. Like even now as...
and he had no solutions for this. He's like, all right,
let's go back to what I had originally. Right. And then so it's like, because even Boyega, who you'd think would call him out for sort of it, but I guess isn't loyalty, because JJ hired him.
Because he knows JJ is, we can argue that Mr. Abrams is partly responsible for this, but I do believe JJ is a fan, and I think he was put into a horrific situation that he couldn't fix.
Right. Marcos, thank you, Marcos.
Why do you think they never tried to develop a complete story for Finn after they started? A good story from beginning, but then he never seemed important again.
And so perfect timing, Marcos. Thank you, Marcos. One of my biggest donors. Thank you. Always dropping big donations. I appreciate it, man. But well said. And a lot of criticism of Last Jedi, sort of, they ruin Finn's own arc in Last Jedi by not allowing him to kill himself. It's like a very frustrating moment where it's like they just never knew what to do with him. And they started well. And then Trevorrow, I felt like, finally cracked. Oh, he's going to ride. He's going to take the stormtroopers.
I read the entire script, and I'll tell you, I love that script. As reading the script, I felt like I was reading Star Wars. I felt my heart was racing every page. I was like, it felt like somebody who loved Star Wars was writing the script, right? And on Finn's character, he gave him the ultimate arc that should have been Finn in that script, Duel of the Fates, leads a stormtrooper rebellion, gets the stormtroopers, others like himself, to rebel against the First Order, and that's helped bring them down. So that's the final fulfillment of that character. Stormtrooper turns against it, convinces his friends that this is wrong, and they join him. So that was great. And with Rose Tico, we talk about Kelly Marie Tran. Rose Tico is the best character in Colin Trevorrow's script because she ends up becoming a spy who infiltrates the First Order.
Yep.
And every time I was like reading her scene, I was like, her scenes are so well written. I'm like, man, let's get back to Rose Tico. What's she doing next? Yeah. Oh my God, Rose is in this situation. I got to get back to that. It was, and she helped bring down. She's one of the pivotal moments that brings down the First Order, and you go with it. You're like, he took that character that he would have. It's so upsetting to me that Kelly Marie Tran, who suffered a lot of humiliation that had nothing to do with her, she could have shined so brightly in that script. Everyone would walk out there and go, that character's great.
Yep.
That answers the deep down inside, the fundamental racism that's in Hollywood, is that they brought these great actors, people of color, minorities, wrote garbage scenes for them, and when a script was given that elevated them to dignity, it was killed.
And then they added Kerry Russell, who, no disrespect to Kerry Russell, but no need to be in that movie. Like everything they added in to me, I was more offended. I'm just curious because while Last Jedi pissed me off, I was more offended by Rise of Skywalker just as a fan because it just felt like they knew what they were not, had no idea what they were doing. And then you realize that's what happened. And then when you go back and you see Trevorrow's script, I know some people who've talked to me about it off the record. I mean, I can't say who, but sources that have confirmed to me, like, Trevorrow was a fan. Trevorrow was busting his ass for them and wrote an amazing script through all these horrific directions. and then just completely they have turned on him.
You know,
Some
and
speculate
it's-
because of that Book of Henry movie or whatever it was, but
Yeah, I mean, that was part of it because, unfortunately, part of the culture of Lucasfilm was they were getting the hot director of the time, right? Rian Johnson was hot coming off of Looper, and Colin was hot coming off of Jurassic World.
Yep.
And then he had one movie that wasn't successful, and that happens. And so suddenly people are like, oh, I didn't make a good movie. And he's now questioning Rian Johnson, who is the apprentice to the Sith Lord, right? And so he's questioning, that's not good. And he's creating drama by asking Luke to come back. That's not good. So he just got rid of him. And on that script, we talked earlier about Daisy Ridley, and about Rey being a nobody. Rey is a nobody in that script. You discover her past. It's not Skywalker. It's not any of these people. It's a family that had nothing to do with this thing. She finds out about her family, but it still works. And her character is actually, what's great is her character is shown as flawed, as making mistakes, and ultimately, she gets her ass kicked by Kylo Ren, a couple of times, and finally, in the climax of the movie, I mean, he horrifically injures her. She gets blinded. She loses her eyes. He hits her face with a lightsaber. She loses her eyes, and she's still fighting. I mean, you're talking about giving Rey a struggle. She's blind at the end of the movie, and she's still a hero.
And then they figure out a way that the ending gave me goosebumps reading it. With the way they use the Force then to have everybody speaking to her through the battle, and then the Jedi show up. It's exactly what we missed in that movie. Like the weird choosing only the voices, and then that finale was such
they were shot. The actors were shot, but we never saw that, right?
Just like why?
Anakin Skywalker appeared, we never saw it.
I don't. So it comes. So So the script was there. Do you have any other insight on what happened there between Trevorrow and Kennedy? Like, what was that Kennedy's pushing that out? From what you've heard?
I got the script from people who are working directly with Trevorrow, right? I won't reveal who, but I got the script from people who know him personally, and I was shocked when I got it because I had received it before it had leaked out. And then I promised my friends, I'm not gonna let anybody see this. And then a day later, I see other people are posting it. So I think somebody in Colin Trevorrow's camp, I don't know that it was Mr. Trevorrow himself, but I think his agents or someone leaked it because they were so tired.
I can reveal that there because I think it was Bob Burnett was the first one who got it out officially, and I was about to do it too because I had some other people sort of friend. It seemed like friends of Trevorrow were just dying to support him because they could just see how hard Disney rolled the bus over him and just sort of let JJ go do it. And it just shows you, I feel bad, but I think same sources now, I will say, have told me that Jurassic World Dominion is supposed to be insane. So I'm excited for him, and I hope he gets that redemption arc, and that is true, and that's a true statement, because it really sucks to see what could have been, right? But again, was that Kennedy's doing that sort of rolled that bus over him?
My understanding is that he'd begun to be seen as a troublemaker. I mean, he had lost his shine when the Book of Henry didn't work, and then he'd begun to be seen as a troublemaker because he really is a fan. And he's like, "Can we just please? All you have to do is edit in Last Jedi. You just have to edit. You just don't have to have Luke fade out. You can leave him on the island staring at the sunset, and then we're going to use him for all this cool stuff I planned, right?" And they're like, "No, stop asking to do that." And in the end, he followed their rules. As you saw in the script. Luke is an active Force ghost throughout the movie and he's actually great because he's basically haunting Kylo Ren.
He's haunting, right?
He's like, it's literally what Obi-Wan had said to Vader in the first movie. He said, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you ever imagined.
Yep.
Now he's appearing, and Kylo Ren can't get rid of this guy. He shows up and he's hassling Kylo, and he's becoming this voice in his ear that won't leave him alone, and it's great.
And then instead, like in Rise of Skywalker, he's just wasted. There's no reason for him to. The whole thing is just it's such a frustrating ending, and
that's the thing is, had Colin's movie been made, it is not a perfect movie. It is a good movie, right? I mean, I as a Star Wars fan said I wouldn't have done it that way, but 98% of it is great.
Well, and it would have turned exactly. It would have figured out a way to finally unite them in a way like, all right, that was fine. And there's people would have still bitched and complained.
It doesn't disrespect The Last Jedi. If you like The Last Jedi, he goes with it. But
then he figures out a way to hit the landing. Exactly.
Yeah, I was like, everyone was going to like this movie. And we would have all said, okay, man, it's done. It's over. The fight is over. But, whatever.
Yeah, from what I heard, the other issue was that because of Carrie Fisher, rest in peace, that definitely put things in trouble because there was a version where Colin she really was like the lead of that script. He had to adjust it. And then I
but
did
he
hear
solved it. I mean, he solved Mark Hamill's situation.
Yeah.
Luke's character works as a Force Ghost. He would have solved Carrie.
But I heard that part of the reason Rose Tico was so terrible in Rise of Skywalker was because JJ had apparently, I don't know if you've have any insight on this too, but JJ had apparently, he was so hell-bent on using the unused footage of Carrie Fisher that they basically wrote a lot of the movie around that, sort of just to have that there. And then they apparently put Rose in scenes with her that looked terrible, and so they put her in important parts of the movie, but ultimately were unusable because they looked awful in the final cut. And so she ends up getting sort of cut from the movie because they put her in with the
of course,
ghost
it's the
Leia.
minority woman that had already been hassled, that had already gotten a mediocre character in the last movie, had people hassling her. And of course they use her, right? I mean, they don't put Daisy Ridley against the other footage, right? They use her because she was expendable, which is a tragedy.
So Colin Trevorrow, I'm glad we got to show him some respect because it's way better. It's way better than what we got. So at the end of the day, to wrap up this question, then we'll move on to some topics and questions. But so whose fault really is it? I mean, it sounds like it's Kathleen Kennedy's. The buck stops with her. But do you feel like JJ should bear some brunt too? I feel like I even heard rumors that he was just getting that JJ cut idea out there just to try to save face, when in reality there's no JJ cut. Like everything you saw is what you got.
I don't. It's interesting. I heard from a friend, like one of my friends who's in that Lucas camp, who knows Lucas, whatever. He said to me there's no JJ cut. So he said to me that there isn't one. So maybe that's true. I mean, again, he doesn't know everything, but he said he heard that from one of the editors. He's like,
right. And of course,
the editor's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. I mean, it was like JJ's long-term editor and then Dominic Monaghan, his like best friend who we put in Star Wars and Lost, were like the two people sort of putting it out there of like, oh, there's so much more you guys. So that felt like defense of JJ trying to save face of like, see, Disney screwed me too. But in reality, I guess that's my final question to you with thoughts of just, do you think JJ should take some more responsibility? Do you think he ever will, to say, you know what? That was a because I mean, even John Boyega, I feel like sort of it said it, which was like he wasn't even supposed to be there, like, which again points it to Kathleen Kennedy for being so desperate to right the wrongs of what they thought they did with Last Jedi, to like, please come back and save us. And then JJ's like, fine, but I don't know what to do. I'll just do it my way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I will give this much. I will give this much to JJ.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Paul. $100 from Paul at the end. We also got 100 from David March. I was going to wrap up in finale with David, but Paul, thank you for sending. Daisy confirmed what everyone with open eyes knew. Disney had no plan. Kathleen and JJ lied, saying the Emperor was always planned. Fact that she did. There's now evidence to prove she's been lying. Trilogy written by multiple writers with no continuity and no respect for the lore, set up by George. Paul, facts, and thank you always for your support. But bravo, Paul, for coming in with that big donation. Yeah, I mean, facts, right? So at the end of the day, JJ and Kathleen, to me, are both at fault in a way, but I got to go where Boyega was sort of going, which was like, look, he wasn't even supposed to be there. He did a favor to them.
And my understanding is, and this could be wrong, my sources say that he did have a plan, that JJ did have at least a treatment or some kind of outline for where this trilogy was going to go, and he handed it off and said, I'll see you all later, right? And then only to discover that then they weren't going to use any of it any more than they were going to use the George Lucas treatments, right? And then, he just scrambled together whatever he could, sat down with his screenwriter and said, okay, we're left with this mess. How do we, and you could tell he had been watching like Fandom Menace videos and he knew what the critiques of it were. I mean, everything, even like the light speed ramming stuff. I mean, they try to correct that in The Rise of Skywalker because, it screws up the entire mythology. If you can just light speed ram stuff, why don't you just light speed ram the Death Star? Why don't you just blow up why'd you go to all this trouble of trying to get these, these proton torpedoes through the tube when you could just send like something into the reactor through hyperspace and blow it up, right? So he understood that there were problems with it. At the end of the day, he is a professional. He's different from me, and that's why he's world famous and worth hundreds of millions of dollars, is that he knows how to play the game, right? And he did his job. I do think the fact that his camp put out those feelers about him having a cut and all that stuff means I think he was embarrassed by this. He was embarrassed by the negative energy. He's never in his career gotten this kind of negative vibe, except maybe after Star Trek. When the director went to. Yeah, and I do believe he wanted this to do well. I don't think any filmmaker ever wants it to do poorly. So, yeah. He cares about Star Wars. I really do think he's a fan. I think Mr. Trevorrow is a more in-depth fan. I think Colin understands the world better. but I do believe J.J. Abrams is a fan.
Do you believe this theory at all? I don't. I'll put it out there. I don't believe it. But do you believe this theory at all that Disney's going to attempt to redo this trilogy?
No, I think they just want to move on. I mean, why pick at an open scar? I mean, just move on.
Why admit? And I can't see Disney ever admitting that kind of failure. You know what I mean? Like they won't
I
even
mean,
put the holiday
It'll just open up this discussion again. The best thing is to just move on to create a timeline in the Mandalorian period, right, and keep going on for that. And then, years will go by. The actors, Mark Hamill eventually will not be available to play anymore, and they'll just move on to another time frame. They'll stay in the Mandalorian world, which is a few years after Return of the Jedi, and they'll stay there for a while.
This has been a fascinating conversation. I want to thank David Martis, who clued me into some of your videos, and he said David just sent $100 as well. Thank you, David. I'm impressed. I said check out this guy, and now you have him on the show. That's how it works. I try my best, but thanks to you guys when you send me over and I get enthralled and I find someone good, I'm like, yeah, please. And so Cameron, thank you for being here. David, thank you for helping make sure we discovered Cameron, who's just so fun to have you. I want to have you back, but I'm going to clip this part for YouTube. So if you're watching live, don't go anywhere. Going to open up some more questions for Cameron, talk some more with you. But those of you who missed the full live stream, I trim it up for that. If you're a member, though, feel free to join. You can always join and catch the whole stream unedited anytime. But thank you guys who are watching on the delay. Those of you watching live, stay tuned. We'll be right back.